It's Social Media Saturday, and I am back with a really incredible guest today, Jackie Candelaria, who spent 8 years at Facebook and Instagram, now known as Meta, and is now branching off on her own to create a digital marketing business, helping other businesses build their audiences on social media. So thanks so much for being here, Jackie.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and we connected over LinkedIn. Wonderful LinkedIn. I saw you had posted a little bit about your story leaving Instagram and about this new venture that you were starting. So I kind of know a little bit about that, but I would love to hear just from the beginning, how did you even get into the social media field?
Whew. Wow. Okay, I'll take you back all the way. So I kind of fell into it, honestly. I went to Stanford, and one of the majors that they offer there is called STS. It means Science, Technology, and Society. Essentially, how technology influences society and how societies shape new technologies. So I was always fascinated with the way that humans interact with tech, and I actually did a lot of research on virtual reality. But I knew that I always wanted to work at a company that was that was changing the way that societies interacted with one another. I always thought that communication between people over, technology was fascinating. So, of course, Facebook was in its heyday at that time, and I would always dream about working there. So, about a year after I graduated, I got the job at Facebook, and mainly because I really wanted to work on a project called internet.org. It doesn't exist within the company anymore, but that's why I went to Facebook in the first place. And it was our efforts to provide internet connectivity to the unconnected parts of the world. Since then, I worked on payments and financial services team at Facebook as a partnerships manager. And then I found my way to Instagram to join their partnerships team, where I stayed for about 3 years. Now I just have so much knowledge accumulated from over the years that I've decided to start my own business to help brands, creators, businesses learn how they can build strong communities on social platforms. I've clearly done a lot of research on Instagram, TikTok, etc. Obviously, all these other apps that have come and gone throughout the years. And I genuinely love teaching people. So it's just been kind of a journey of following my interests. And I didn't expect to stay in the social media world for so long, but I think it's just been fascinating. So I've just continued following my interests.
I love that point about following your interests. I mean, what really a dream place to work at if you are interested in communications and really like the innovation of communication and how it's evolving for humans online,
Definitely. And I think
media.
it's lived so many lives. The company has lived so many lives in the past, however many years it's been around. And I would say, this is obvious, it's a very different company now than it was when I joined in 2014. And, just being along for that ride and that transformation was incredible. But I actually talked with one of my old colleagues the other day about what would be the Facebook now that it was when we joined, like which company is that? And I'm not sure there is one just like it right now, but I'd be curious. I mean, we can talk about this another time, but I'm curious also from the community that watches this, like what their thoughts are on, what's the 2013, 2012, like Facebook or Instagram now. Because I do think that, these social media companies have just gone through such massive transformations, and the shift in social media is changing so much that I'm curious to see what's next.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it has evolved so much over the last 10 years, even over the last 5 years, the last year in terms of which are the most popular platforms, who's on what. I mean, yeah, Facebook was definitely in its heyday, and now we think of it more of like maybe an older population or right, exactly. It's just, yeah, it has evolved so much, and it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve. I mean, in the years that you were there, what were some of like the key differences or like the big shifts that you saw from like when you started to when you left?
Oh my gosh, so many key differences. The biggest one was the switch, to being a mobile first company,
Mm,
because Facebook, of course, like started predominantly on the web and then shifted to being a mobile first company. And that was huge. It was a huge shift in, obviously the way society consumes media or social media in general, information. Um, Short form video was a massive shift in the past several years. Even though short form video has been around for so long, like Vine was around when I was in college 10 years ago, 11 years
mhm,
ago, and that was short form video, but it just recently kind of exploded in the past couple of years.
mhm.
Um, and
I love that
I
Vine
think
is
that
having a comeback kind of in
I
its
know.
TikTok era. Hmm.
Totally. Yeah. But there are lots of shifts. And I think just internally, the company has gone through a lot of shifts, just growing from, when I first started at the company, we could all fit on one campus. And
Hmm.
now it's exploded, and the campus is like, has 12 campuses within it, even just in Menlo Park. And there's, offices all over the globe. So it's just, the growing pains, differences of like being a smallish company. I would even say it was small when I joined, but just to growing into this massive global like behemoth that has such an impact on, people's daily lives. I think there's
Definitely.
there's been a lot of drama, obviously, too.
Yeah.
Lived through Cambridge
It has been.
Analytica, yeah, there's been a lot. So
Yeah. And that I guess comes with the territory with something this big or something that, I mean, you mentioned the shift to mobile first. And really, I mean, that changed how we interact with our phones and like how we were mostly on our computers, and now we're really in an era where everybody is bringing their phones with them everywhere, and gets all of their media from that. And it's interesting to think that Facebook was definitely a huge part of that shift.
yeah,
And on the short form content tip, you also were such a big part of the Reels, the movement to Reels for Instagram. And I would love
for
to hear
better or
more.
for worse.
Yes. When I think about it, a lot of times when you talk about Reels and Instagram, you can't talk about Reels without talking about TikTok, right? TikTok really exploded on the scene, and it was garnering all its attention.
Definitely.
And then Instagram came with its kind of like response to that, and it has been really successful. But I would love to hear about what that process was, and like what was your role in it.
Great question. I will share as much as I can on this. I led the creator outreach strategy for the launch of Reels. I was on the partnerships team at Instagram, and I worked really closely with all of our partner managers and marketing teams and the product teams. But, you know, even prior to the launch, I was a key advisor to the product team to ensure that we were building a product with creators and businesses in mind. Um, Launching a format on Instagram is quite rare. I'm sure you're aware. Most people are aware. Stories is a format. IGTV was a format, doesn't exist anymore. Feed is a format. Like there are a few formats. We launch features and little things all the time, but it takes many months behind the scenes before you see anything on your Instagram before we launch, especially a format. Um, and, we had the added obstacle of launching during the beginning of lockdown for COVID. So
Yes.
that
Oh my
was
gosh, can't
fun
forget about
one.
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was crazy. A lot, of course, was going on behind the scenes many months before the launch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a lot of commentary about launching this in response to TikTok, which I think is fair, 100%. Um, I think it's also interesting to note that, these formats I mentioned, they don't launch in a matter of days, and video has been around on Instagram for many years. I think like since 2016 or something. I should know this. I used to know this. And short form video consumption,
Sounds right.
we talked about Vine. It's been around for a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
short form video consumption on Instagram was already huge.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the reason behind like why we decided to build out editing tools, build out the ability to consume video from unconnected audiences, like of course was in response to how we saw people wanting to reach new audiences, reach new people, and get more creative on the platform. Editing was already available in Stories. So these things are kind of available. You can reach unconnected audiences in Explore.
Mhm.
But I do think it's completely valid to say like TikTok exploded and then Reels came right after. Like it's there was like there's a correlation to that. I'm not denying that.
That's such an interesting perspective. I mean, because that's the outsider looking in perspective, or rather the user perspective, or the social media marketer who's not inside of Instagram. We saw TikTok explode. We saw Reels come out. We're like, okay,
Yeah.
that must be their response. But it makes so much sense to hear from you. You were watching your users on the platform and seeing what they were wanting more of. And I guess this is kind of just a natural next step and not necessarily just like oh, they're doing it, so we got to do it too.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, these companies rip off each other all the time. Like, the news feed on Facebook was ripped off by every company, by Twitter, by et cetera. Like this
Mm-hmm.
happens. Like
Yeah,
stories was popular by Snapchat first. Like I'm not
definitely.
denying that's a thing. What I am just adding is another layer of like most of the world saw TikTok take off in 2020 at the onset of the pandemic. It was hugely popular, especially amongst teens and other audiences across the world before the pandemic. Um, Instagram was, of course, building this product. We didn't decide in March of 2020, once TikTok started taking off, we didn't decide, let's launch Reels now. Like that wasn't a spur of the moment decision. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes before you make that decision. That's all I'm trying to paint the picture of. But I think it's valid to say, these companies are aware of consumer behavior and in the direction that teens are driving user behavior. So I think like there's lots of factors that come into play.
Definitely. So much going on behind the scenes and so much like it's a mix of both, likely of what you're seeing work on your own platform and as well as what you're seeing work out in the world on other platforms and other services. And I mean, probably so much learning just in general from watching your user base play with the different features of the app and grow their audiences in different ways. And in the time of witnessing that and of learning of that, what have you kind of seen as really effective? I guess what I'm asking is like there's so many people. There's more than 2 billion active users on Instagram right now,
It's
who
crazy.
are so many of which are actively creating and trying to stand out and build their own audience. So what kind of tips do you have for those people on building their audience? I know you have an online course that kind of dives deeper into it, but yeah, what would you like to share today?
Yeah, I have a lot of tips on this. One of my jobs at Instagram, people laugh when I say this. People on TikTok laughed at me when I said this, that it was literally my job to teach people how to use the features on Instagram. But it was like that's also what marketing does, is they're trying to get the word out on when we launch something new to coach people on the best practices so that they can, get the most out of a new feature. Um, there are clearly a lot of ways. And you mentioned I do have an online course where I share most of these. I put a ton of my information into this course so that anyone can access my strategies and my tips and tricks. Um, because you're right, there's a ton of people on this platform and it's really hard to like stand out and cut through the noise. A couple I can think of off the top of my head, some of my main ones. The first is stop trying to be perfect. Perfect is boring. Show the real you, show what makes you interesting. Don't be afraid to try out new content types. I think we're leaving an era where Instagram used to be this place where you went and saw this perfect, beautifully polished content and everything was
Absolutely.
unattainable. And
Mhm.
that content doesn't perform as well anymore. What you want to see and what
Mhm.
people are proving that they want to see is like the real content, the raw, the unedited, the behind the scenes stuff. Like if you make a mistake, post that. That's interesting. Show your human side. Um, Another one is like collaborate with people, meet people, work with creators, other creators, reach out to brands, try to expand your network because you're essentially like melding two audiences when you're able to collaborate with somebody else. And you'll see a lot of the top brands, a lot of the top creators do this where they have, you remember the TikTok houses and like pods of creators that will create content together. And they're just able to grow their audiences that way. But you can do this on a much smaller scale as well, just by trying to collaborate with other people that are, like that might have similar audiences to you, but also might have different audiences and you need to explore your different interests. So if you're a health and wellness creator, but you're also really interested in baseball, it's very random, but try and explore those interests, and you may find more audiences that are like you, that might have, most people aren't just like one trick ponies. Most people don't just have one interest. So try to expand that. That said, you need to also focus on your niche and like narrowing that down and being very clear about what you stand for on, and this is Instagram, not Instagram specific. I think like this is helpful across many social media platforms, but if you try to be everything, like don't try to be everything. Yes, try new things, but don't try to be everything, because then you end up being confusing and you end up being nothing. I talk a lot about that in my course, and strategies for how you can, how you can build an effective content strategy that will help you cut through the noise. And then the last thing I just have to plug is try to manage burnout, because it's really hard to post every single day. I think like one of the previous tips I heard from lots of social media managers was like, post content every single day, try a new reel every single day. And that may help some people grow. I don't think it's an effective way to grow your audience. I think if anything, it just burns you out, and you're not producing good content anymore. So your content will then hit a plateau and it won't be interesting for people. But find ways to manage your time so it doesn't lead you to not posting at all, because it's a lot of work being constantly online. And I do share a lot of tips in my course about, managing burnout and effectively posting consistently. But yeah, those are some of my top points.
Oh, those are wonderful tips. Thank you for sharing. And I mean, especially I think the burnout one is key. It's so easy just in general to get swept up in the social media world. And then when you're creating, feel like, oh, I need to be creating all the time. And it can really lead to burnout and comparison and all of these other things that I think are just important to keep an eye on, and not put too much pressure on yourself is really what I was hearing you say. And the other piece that I'm always excited about is the collaboration. Like when that feature came out on Instagram that you could do a cross post between two accounts, I was like, yes. So I've really seen that. Yeah, it's like the best way. I mean, I've seen that work really well for clients on LinkedIn, even of just like, in this way, what we're doing now is just kind of reaching out and doing cross posts or collaborations with other creators. So thank you for sharing your tips. And for anybody watching, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay. If you would like more an in-depth dive into those tips, or even more tips on how to build your social media audience or your Instagram audience, please check out Jackie's online course. And just check her out in general. Below, you'll find a transcript of her responses if you want to go back. And also her links to her social media accounts. So Jackie, thank you so much again for taking the time.
It was my pleasure. It was so good to chat with you. And I'm excited to meet more people through this as well. I'm always looking to chat with more people that are interested in not just social media, but just, in the way that the world is constantly evolving and changing. And I am excited for your future of this podcast or this endeavor, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very sweet, Jackie. Yes, I'm very excited to grow the Social Media Saturday community. So don't miss next week's episode. All right. Till next time. Bye.